Hello, Star Wars fans. I thought it would be interesting to provide an alternate blueprint slash shell for a Han Solo movie that takes into account character growth and ends up being more than just nostalgia bait. Since this Han Solo script would be the origin story of an already established character, we already know a number of things that need to be addressed by the end of the film. For starters, Han Solo in the original trilogy is a character that is so competent that he gets irritated by the incompetency of others.
No! This one goes there, that one goes there, right?
He is cynical and cocky, and he lives life on the edge. He is also a pilot, and Chewbacca is his co-pilot, and they are portrayed as having been a team for a long time. So by the end of this origin film, these things would have to be addressed in a believable manner. First of all, the film would have to start with the Star Wars opening crawl, and the iconic crawl would outline the state of the galaxy and mention the Empire before ending with a few sentences mentioning a young man that has recently started working in a shipyard on Corellia in these troubled times. Next, we'd see Solo working in a shipyard on Corellia. This would explain why Han knows how to work on ships. Solo would be portrayed as a dreamer by telling his co-worker friends in the shipyard about his plans to be a famous pilot someday, before he's startled by the sudden arrival of a supervisor that tells him that it's impossible because he'll never be able to afford his own ship and for everyone else to get back to work. These beginning scenes should also set up Han as being physically larger than his co-workers. He is larger in the original trilogy than Luke and Leia, and it would be important later on in the movie. Then we'd see him trudging home one day before spotting a visual feed displaying a recruitment ad for young men to join Imperial starfighter squadrons for a duration of 5 years. And he would mention it to his friends at work the next day, and they'd all decide to sign up to be fighter pilots, and then promise to meet up at a certain bar in 5 years when their service is over. And then it'd go to the next day where we see Solo in line in front of all his friends. And when he reaches the front of the line, Solo gets informed that he's too tall and too large for a TIE fighter cockpit. And when he desperately tells them that he wants to be a pilot, he's directed to a booth off to the side that no one is applying for, that no one's in line for. And this would just be like a normal shuttle pilot line. And when he gets there, the guy at the booth would be sleeping because no one's in his line. And when he wakes up, the recruitment guy would be surprised that Han's not in the fighter pilot line, since it's rare for Corellians to not want to be fighter pilots. And this guy keeps on going on before Solo can respond to that, and talks about how smart Han is, since it takes years to become a great pilot, and how Corellians are too eager to show off and never make it to the end of service, which would imply that starfighter pilots never live long enough to become great pilots. And at this, Han Solo would shoot his friends one last horrified look as he's ushered away to finish the application elsewhere. After this, there's a 3-year time skip, and we see a shuttle arriving out of hyperspace to descend onto a planet, and it's Han. After 3 years, he is now a shuttle pilot, and he's cruising through the atmosphere preparing to land, and Han is flying dangerously low, skimming the treetops, dodging the occasional taller tree, and generally making his job more entertaining for himself while talking over the channels. He talks about picking up a shipment, and learns about the Imperial base being in turmoil because the superiors there are suspecting that there is someone on the base helping smugglers. Han lands, and the audience learns that he's there to pick up a troublesome Wookiee slave. The officers checking him in before loading him up mention something about his unnecessary maneuvers, and Han flippantly responds that he was bored, which of course irritates the officer who was questioning him in the first place, and a second officer who's there listening is amused, more amused by the fact that the other officer is irritated more so than at Han's answer. The officers then motion for stormtroopers to lead a single chained Wookiee aboard Han's shuttle, and the irritated officer notes that Han doesn't have a co-pilot. And Han responds with how he's good enough to not need one, and in the background we see the chained Wookiee looking over as if he's overhearing the conversation. After Han's shuttle is loaded, Han boards and is given permission to take off, Han is then given course directions and ends up overflying a smuggling deal between two ships on the ground. Before Han can report them, his shuttle is shot down and his shuttle crash lands near a clearing next to the smugglers. Han and the Wookiee survive and are held at gunpoint by smugglers. Perhaps Greedo could be one of them. The smugglers mention how there shouldn't have been anyone to overfly their deal, according to the schedule, the Imperial schedule, that they knew about. And the Imperial base has noticed by now that Han shuttle is no longer on their screens and are sending a patrol of TIE fighters over. The smugglers have the Imperial channels tapped and overhear the order and know they can't finish unloading one ship to the other with the Imperial TIEs soon to arrive. Han is identified as a pilot by his uniform and is told to pilot the ship with smuggled goods. That way Han will be a scapegoat for the smugglers. Han objects to the plan because the smuggler ship is crap, so they offer to kill him right then and there instead. So of course Han has no choice but to agree and fly the ship despite Imperial TIE fighter pursuit. The smugglers do try to encourage Han slightly by telling him that if he successfully escapes and delivers their cargo for them, that maybe he can end up working with them. And they give him coordinates for a hyperjump to a different planet. And the smugglers decide to kill the surviving Wookiee since he's a potential witness if they leave him alive and leave him behind. And they can't afford to let him live, but Han tells them he'll need a co-pilot to fly the shuttle, despite the fact that he was bragging about not needing one earlier, which the Wookiee had overheard. And then we have Han piloting the smuggler ship with the contraband. And Han is on the intercom trying to convince the base that he's not a smuggler and not to shoot him down, but the irritated officer that was checking him in earlier ignores his pleas and commands for the ship to be shot down, since Han must obviously be the suspected Imperial smuggler. And the amused officer is there and sighs, but agrees for Han to get shot down. And then there's an epic chase where Han pilots the ship through the trees, you know, the usual ties crash into trees, explode. While Han is evading Imperial pursuit, the smugglers are off in the distance, keeping an eye on Han to see if he actually manages to escape. And he hyperspaces away to the coordinates given to him by the smugglers. So for a quick recap, Han by this point is a character that many people can connect with. He has been told it takes money to succeed, and he has been shoehorned into a job that's not quite what he wanted due to factors outside his control. And despite excelling at that job, he loses it anyway. Again, due to factors he can't control. Han Solo knows how to work on ships due to working in a shipyard. He has proven himself to be a great pilot by doing his crazy maneuvers with the shuttle earlier and by evading a TIE fighter patrol. He is jaded due to being told he couldn't achieve his dreams, and then when he was about to achieve his dreams of becoming a fighter pilot, he's relegated to a normal side job of being a shuttle pilot. A lot of the audience members should be able to relate to doing something that they never expected to find themselves doing and something they don't really enjoy. And now he's mixed with the wrong crowd, and he's now accompanied by a Wookiee that he can't understand, whose life he's just saved due to saying he needed a co-pilot, when earlier in the film he said he was good enough to not need a co-pilot. So back to the story. Han and the Wookiee come out of hyperspace on the coordinates given to them by the smugglers, and they find the smugglers already waiting for them. The smugglers had a faster hyperspace drive on their ship, so they arrived earlier. So the smugglers escort Han and the Wookiee down to the planet to a spaceship port, and when both spaceships land, there's a third party that comes out to greet them. Han and the Wookiee exit the ship with their hands up to meet the smugglers on the other party. The smugglers are about to kill Han and the Wookiee despite promising them a chance to work if they successfully delivered the cargo. However, Han and Chewie are saved by a random alien from the third party who interrupts and asks why they need to die. And the smugglers report what happened and just tell the alien that leaving Han and the Wookiee alive is unnecessary. Plus, Greedo mentions that he promised his Imperial contact to kill Han, and the random alien asks if the contact paid him to do so, and Greedo shrugs no. So the random alien flips him a few credits and says the galaxy's a large place, and that the Imperial contact won't know that Han is still alive. Greedo claps Han on the shoulder and says it's his lucky day. And then we cut to seeing the random alien talk to Han and the Wookiee about flying a ship for him. He makes this offer because Greedo just reported to him that Han Solo was able to outfly Imperial pursuit despite flying a crappy ship. He mentions how his previous pilot has struck out on his own and bought his own ship and is now working for himself. Of course, Han is interested in this offer since the previous pilot of this random alien was able to earn enough money to buy his own ship, and so he agrees. And the Wookiee growls for their attention and points to itself and then to Han. And the random alien can understand and says the Wookiee wants to tag along with Han since Han saved his life. And Han responds that the Wookiee will have to learn to be an actual co-pilot, and the Wookiee agrees. And then there will be a scene where the alien introduces himself, and his name, let's call him Rio, in honor of the cool alien in Disney's Solo. And the alien will also introduce or translate for the Wookiee, and of course the Wookiee's name is Chewbacca. We're going to see Rio show Han and Chewie the ropes of being smugglers. And basically Rio is kind of like the middleman. He gets the jobs for the group, and Han and Chewie perform the missions. And then there will be 2 to 4 minutes of short montages, and there's going to be dialogue from Rio as we get to see Han and Chewie before, during, and after the missions. We're going to see their successes and failures, and we're going to see a variety of mob bosses. We're going to meet a variety of other smugglers and bounty hunters. We'll get to see Han and Chewie work together with those people. We'll get to see them clash against those people. We'll get to see them celebrate with some of those people. We'll get to see a variety of ships. We'll get to see Chewie learning how to become a co-pilot under Han's tutelage. We'll get to see Han growing confident in the new role that he has taken upon himself. And we'll get to see Greedo getting increasingly irritated by Han and Chewie's success since he inadvertently created his own competitors. Eventually we'll get to see Jabba, and they'll be getting jobs from Jabba. And we'll get to see Jabba's advisor, Bib Fortuna, and his growing concern over the success of Rio's team. Bib Fortuna has to worry about being replaced if Rio is too successful, and anyone replaced by Jabba has a really gruesome end, usually. And we'll get to see Bib Fortuna's concern grow into malice towards Rio. The montage will end when Han declines a mission due to a prior engagement and ends up borrowing Rio's ship. Han and Chewie fly to Corellia, and Han ends up asking Chewie to guard the ship. And it has been 5 years since Han and his friends decided to enlist as pilots for the Empire, and he's there to fulfill the promise of meeting up when their enlistment is over. Han ends up waiting at a bar where they all agree to meet, and by midnight, no one has showed up. The audience is left to assume that his friends are dead, since the shuttle pilot recruiter told Han that starfighter pilots rarely made it to the end of their enlistment. So Han ends up buying a drink for all his dead friends, and he silently mourns before heading back to the ship. When Han and Chewie return to the planet where they left Rio, Rio runs frantically out to the spaceport's landing zone, and Han and Chewie wonder what is the rush. And as they disembark, Rio kind of shoos them off the ramp and kind of heads into the ship. And before the ramp closes, he tells Han and Chewie at the bottom of the ramp that, hey, there's a bounty on his head now, and he has to run. And he ends up shouting to Han that he has a bunch of credits stashed away at his place that he couldn't grab in time, and that Han should take the money because he doesn't know if he'll escape from the bounty hunters. So money has no use for a dead man, and that's why Han should take the money. And then the last Han and Chewie see of Rio is Rio's ship jumping into hyperspace. If the montage from earlier was done properly, the audience should be able to tell that the anonymous bounty placed on Rio's head was placed by Bib Fortuna because of Bib Fortuna's worries about being replaced by the successful Rio. And then the next couple scenes show Han and Chewie finding the credits at Rio's safe house, and they realize they need to buy their own ship now because they've been piloting Rio's ship while they were working for Rio. And Rio just flew off with his own ship, leaving Han and Chewie stuck without a ship to pilot. Now they're going to use Rio's credits to try to buy a ship, and they're out trying to buy a used ship, and they find a cheap one that they figured they can use for smuggling. But they don't like Han realizes that the credits that he got from Rio plus his own credits is not enough, and it's not enough until Chewie slides over his own stash of credits that he saved up while working for Rio. So the Han that was earlier told he'll never be able to afford a ship now has enough to buy a ship, and he buys the ship, and he bought it with Chewie's help, and Han and Chewie's bond grows stronger because of this. Because Han appreciates that Chewie helped him obtain a ship, and now they formed a strong team. Even though Han and Chewie now have a ship, they no longer have their middleman, so they decide to work full-time for Jabba. Then there will be another minute or two of montages where Han and Chewie are super successful working for Jabba and make a name for themselves as successful smugglers, with Jabba bragging about them. And we'll get to see Greedo make another lemon-sucking face again. And we'll get to see them deal with like inspections with fake identities, running from the Imperials with their new ship. Eventually, Han and Chewie get a mission where they need to use an Imperial insider to help them smuggle something. And they learn the insider's name, and it's the superior officer who ordered for Han's death. Earlier in the film, when Han was forced to pilot the smuggler's ship to escape Imperial pursuit, basically the officer used Han as a scapegoat to cover for his own illicit activities, and then there will be a scene of Han's face as he realizes he was a scapegoat and he wants revenge. So Han takes the job. And then Han is on the planet where the mission is to take place, and as he's walking through town, he is called out to, and it turns out it's one of his friends from Corellia who signed up to be a pilot, and he's still alive. And they sit down and talk, and Han finds out that his friend didn't show up for the meetup on Corellia because the pilot thought he was the last one alive and he didn't want to deal with it. The friend asks what Han is up to, and Han evades the question. And then Han asks about the dirty officer and learns that he's hated by every Imperial soldier on that planet, especially by the officer who is directly underneath the dirty superior officer, who turns out to be the amused officer who helped check in Han when he arrived on the Wookiee planet. Han tells his Corellian friend that he happens to be a friend of that officer, at least that's what he claims, and that he hopes that his Corellian friend can arrange a meeting between Han and the officer. And the amused officer shows up while off duty and is surprised / scared to recognize Han. And Chewie blocks the officer's escape, and Han informs the good officer that he was innocent and was set up by the irritated officer from earlier in the movie, who happens to be the good officer's boss now. And Han wants revenge now, and he plans to kill the dirty officer who scapegoated him, and the good officer can use that opportunity to claim that he caught the dirty contact and get a promotion, and it will be a win-win for both of them. And he tells the good officer about the arranged meetup that he's going to have with the dirty officer. And later on, Han meets the dirty backstabbing officer who recognizes him. But before either of them can say or do anything, the good officer charges in and catches the deal in action as planned with a squad of stormtroopers. And Han shoots the backstabbing officer in the back when he turns around to try to defuse the situation and pretend that nothing's going on. And then Han runs away, while the good officer sends only minimal pursuit, which Han and Chewie deal with easily. A few scenes later, Han and Chewie complete the smuggling deal with the newly promoted good officer, who is now the dirty contact for Jabba. Han and Chewie return to Jabba with the smuggled goods and let him know that the contact mysteriously passed away, but they managed to find a new contact so that they could finish the deal for Jabba. Jabba doesn't seem to mind, as long as he got the goods in the end and he still has a contact in the Empire. Afterwards, Han sees a flyer for a sabacc tournament, and he joins, and we get to the final table, and we see Lando across the table from Han, and eventually it's just down to the two of them, and Lando creates a side pot trying to intimidate Han, and he throws in a marker for any single ship that Lando owns, and Lando is known to collect fast ships, and he owns multiple of them. Han, of course, has the best hand possible in sabacc and matches the side pot because he just finished a job for Jabba, so he has the money, and he wins. Han wins the tournament, and he wins Lando's marker, and he goes with Lando to choose a ship out of Lando's collection. And in Lando's collection, Han peruses through them, and he spots a hunk of junk in the corner of Lando's showroom, and he wants to know about it, and Lando is trying to distract him with the characteristics of the other ships, but Han is not dissuaded, and he ends up picking that hunk of junk named the Millennium Falcon because it's more suitable for smuggling than some of the fancier ships that Lando is trying to distract Han with. Han reasons that if this ship is in this collection, it must be more impressive and quicker than it looks, or Lando wouldn't even bother keeping it. And then we get a shot of Lando mournfully watching Han fly away with the Millennium Falcon, which is followed by a scene of Han and Chewie inspecting the ship and figuring out that Lando must have sunk a lot of money into upgrading the ship and that Han got a steal. And the movie ends with Han telling Chewie that with a few more upgrades, the Millennium Falcon would be the perfect ship. The basic breakdown of the movie is that Han starts out as a naive young man willing to share his dreams of becoming a famous pilot with others until confronted with the reality of money. And just when he thinks he can sidestep the money issue by becoming an Imperial starfighter pilot, Han is shunted aside to becoming a shuttle pilot instead due to his size, which is a factor outside his control. And then he's forced to desert the Empire by smugglers and the Imperial pursuit actively trying to kill him. The smugglers almost kill him afterwards, but he is saved by an alien that takes Han and Chewie under his wing. The alien mentor figure ends up getting a bounty on his head and running for his life. So Han's really in a position where he can't trust anybody except Chewie because he doesn't know who put the bounty on Rio's head. And most of the friends he convinced to join Imperial starfighter squadrons with him are actually dead. But he is having success on the wrong side of the law and is becoming famous in various underworld circles as a great pilot. So by the end of this film, it would be believable that all these experiences added together would turn a naive young man into the cynical and cocky rogue that puts himself first and always lands on his feet, and also showed the reason why Han is a great pilot and able to work on ships. And not only that, Han has piloted 5 spaceships throughout the film that can be used for merchandising, all of which would have been portrayed in a scene where Han did something cool with them. Ultimately, this video was an attempt to provide a rough blueprint for a Han Solo film that would successfully tackle the character growth of both Han and the bond that formed between him and Chewbacca, while also tying in underworld elements. If you think this video successfully captured the true essence of a Han Solo film, click the like button below. If you really like this video, click subscribe because I'm also working on an alternate storyline for episodes 7, 8, and 9 in the coming weeks to try and capture the true feeling of Star Wars escapism. And tell me what you thought about the direction of this Han Solo storyline in the comments below. Thanks for listening, everyone.